And to what is shaping up to be the most exciting political transition in history, possibly. Barack Obama taking over as President of the United States next month. Just a month after the election, Mr. Obama has selected 13 of the 24 most important positions in his administration, compared with Bill Clinton, who had only picked one in the same time frame. Perhaps the most important, and certainly the most publicised, was his selection of Hillary Clinton as his Secretary of State. He's also picked his Treasury Secretary and the head of the White House Economic Council, as well as retaining the Bush Defence Secretary. Not surprising, with the US in the middle of a global financial crisis and 2 wars. And here to talk about the Obama transition team is the CEO of the US Studies Centre at Sydney University, Geoff Garrett. Geoff Garrett, welcome to Sunday Agenda again.
Good morning, Helen. How are you?
Nice to see you on the other side of the campaign.
Yes.
Now, with the economic crisis and the fact that America is involved in 2 wars, the President-elect himself has said he doesn't have time to waste. But there is a danger, isn't there, in picking his cabinet too soon?
Well, maybe picking the cabinet too soon could be a risk for Obama, but what he's steadfastly said is that there can only be one president at a time. So what I think we've seen from the Obama transition team is signalling strength, competence, experience in the administration without treading on too many toes in the Bush administration with respect to the day-to-day operation of policy.
It is extraordinary the way they're cooperating with each other, isn't it?
Well, I think if you look back in history, you'd have to go a long way to find a time when the transition period was as fraught as the current one. So certainly people are talking about FDR in 1932-33, but in more recent history, I think the only time when the transition period has been as crisis-ridden as this one was from Jimmy Carter to Ronald Reagan, when the US hostages were being held in Iran, but Reagan really was out of that story. Now we're talking, I think, much more about cooperation between the outgoing and incoming administrations.
It is a long time, and for us in Australia it's hard for us to comprehend, a long time between inauguration and the actual election, given all the problems facing the new president. Now, Franklin Roosevelt had to wait until March before his inauguration, but they amended the Constitution for his second term in office. Couldn't they amend the Constitution now to make that time much shorter?
Well, it's an interesting question. Constitutional amendments in the US are not easy things to pass. Big supermajority requirements not only in Congress but also in the states. But I think the real story in the US is that you have to change. It's not just the cabinet level positions that are changing. Senior bureaucratic positions, which in Australia would be sitting there to provide continuity, in the US all those desks change. So it does take quite a while to do this. And in fact, the typical story is that presidents don't have their full team in office until several months after they're actually inaugurated. So I think it'd be hard to reduce it. And of course we have the holiday season sitting there in the middle. So I'm not sure we're going to see that anytime soon.
Hillary Clinton, what sort of Secretary of State will she make? And will she have any trouble being confirmed?
I don't think she'll have any trouble because the big story in the run-up to the announcement of her selection was, would Bill Clinton divulge the people who've donated to his Clinton Global Foundation? The answer in the end from the former president was yes. So I think that would have been the big one surrounding her confirmation. It'll go through. Of course, the question is, what kind of Secretary of State will she be? She is a rival. She's very experienced, but I think probably foreign policy watchers are asking the question, will she be more cautious and more hawkish on foreign policy than Obama was? In the campaign, as you remember, that was the division between them.
Yeah, they made a lot of the division between them. So will she have her way, or will President Obama say, no, this is what we're going to do, and you carry it out?
One would expect this to be President Obama's party, but of course the stronger the people you have around you, the greater the risk that they might be pushing for autonomy.
And yet he would have known that when he appointed her, wouldn't he?
He would have known that, but I think everything we know about Obama says that he wants very strong voices around him, but I presume he'll also want iron discipline. Once an administration position is formed, he'll want iron discipline going forward. And I think you can bet that that was part of the conversation, probably the several conversations that they had.
What will this mean for Bill Clinton? I mean, will he still have the same freedom to do the sort of work and make the sort of speeches that he's been free to do since leaving office?
Well, it's an interesting question. Former presidents tend to, they have some choices. They have a lot of autonomy. They have all this stature for the rest of their lives, and the question is what they do with their stature. Bill Clinton has been obviously far more active, I think, than any other former president. He was younger when he left office. He left with an enormous amount of global goodwill. Based on everything we know about Bill Clinton, it'd be hard to see him shackled unduly. But of course, now he's the first husband to the second lady or something like that. I mean, it's a pretty complicated situation, I think.
That's right. It's going to be really interesting to see how that one works itself out. Now, what do you think about the key economic appointments? Timothy Geithner as his Treasury Secretary and Larry Summers as head of the White House National Economic Council. Can they solve a seemingly insoluble crisis in the economy?
Well, I mean, that one depends on how you look at it. I think that there are some people, particularly on the sort of harder right, the more conservative Wall Street Journal right in the American economics community, who say the problem with Tim Geithner is he was the architect of a bailout plan that has been pretty inconsistent and doesn't seem to have been working. Larry Summers, the former Treasury Secretary under Bill Clinton, has impeccable economic credentials, but he hasn't been involved in this stuff very much. I think what we'd have to say about the team, however, is that this is
Sorry, about Timothy Geithner, you say that in a questioning manner, but he's been actually given quite a lot of accolades for the way he's handled through the New York Federal Reserve, the way he's been handling the crisis, or his role in it.
Well, there's been, on the one hand, on the other hand. I think that Geithner and Bernanke and Paulson, the top three in the Wall Street bailout, get a lot of credit for acting quickly. The question is whether they acted decisively. They changed the bailout from buying distressed mortgages to recapitalizing banks after a couple of weeks. There's not a lot of evidence that the credit crisis is actually smoothing out. I think we've had a sort of uptick, in fact, in credit problems recently. But as I said, I think it's only the sort of hardcore conservative right on the economy that's going to question this team. Everybody else is going to say you want experience and you want demonstrated capacity for action, and these guys certainly have that.
Okay, well now, it was interesting, even Karl Rove, who's the architect of George Bush's victories, he praised Obama's choices for this new team of rivals. Now that must surely worry some of the left-wing liberals who supported Obama.
Well, maybe in Karl Rove's wildest dreams, the sort of administration implodes because there are too many big egos and too much diversity of opinion on the team. But as I said before, I think the story for Obama is probably one in which he wants really robust discussion behind closed doors about the direction of policy, but real unanimity once the policy is announced and begins to be executed.
But just back on the economic issues, I mean, unemployment is really gathering a pace there. These are extremely serious problems. Can this team do it?
I don't know whether any team can do it. I mean, I think the story that we're watching in real time now is a credit crisis turning into a very deep recession in the US. I mean, they keep updating the unemployment statistics, but I think the headline one is in the last 3 months now, there have been more than 1 million jobs lost in the US. The unemployment rate is essentially going up vertically, and people are talking about a 10% unemployment rate in the US, which would be the highest thing in 30 years. Couple that with an unprecedented financial crisis, no one really knows where the bottom is there. Enormous challenges for anybody.
Okay, briefly, National Security Council Chief is James Jones, and also Robert Gates is staying as Defence Secretary. What do you think of that sort of strategy?
Well, Obama has always wanted to signal, I'm going to be tough and sensible on foreign policy, but I really think that the Iraq war was a mistake. And I think that the team he has allows him to begin to execute this less Iraq, more Afghanistan strategy that he's had as his core foreign policy position for 6 months. It's a pretty good team, I think, to execute that plan.
Okay, so great optimism, though, despite these problems?
Well, Obama, there's global goodwill surrounding Obama is still still enormously high. He has more political capital in the US and stronger majorities than any president in a generation, but he's also facing clearly unprecedented challenges at home and abroad. So massively high expectations. Can Obama reach them? Who knows? But I think we'd have to say at the moment he's taking all the right steps to at least have a fighting chance of winning some of these major battles he'll face.
We will watch with great interest through to end of January. Geoff Garrett, thanks very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Helen.